I still remember the smell of pine and rot the day my son left us to die. It wasn't dramatic. There was no scream, no crash, no explosion. Just the quiet crunch of gravel under tires as he drove away, leaving me, his mother, and his 10-year-old son standing in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by trees that felt like they were closing in. The sun was setting. The air was cold. And my grandson, little Theo, looked up at me with those wide, trusting eyes and asked, "Grandma, when is Daddy coming back?" I didn't have an answer. Because deep down, I already knew. He wasn't. If you've ever been abandoned by someone you loved, someone you sacrificed everything for, then you know exactly what I felt in that moment. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was betrayal so deep it felt like my chest had been hollowed out. And if you're watching this from your living room, your car, your bedroom at 3 in the morning because you can't sleep, comment below and tell me where you're from. Because I want to know I'm not alone in this. I want to know that someone out there understands what it's like to be thrown away like trash by the person you gave your whole life to. And if stories like this hit you the way they hit me, check the description box below. There are more stories there, stories of survival, of revenge, of people who refuse to stay down. You'll want to hear them. But first, let me tell you mine. My name is Eleanor Price. I'm 63 years old now, but back then, I was 53 and still strong enough to believe I could fix things. I'd spent 2 decades raising my son, Nathan, alone. His father walked out when Nathan was 2. No explanation. No child support. Just gone. So I worked double shifts at the hospital as a nurse, skipped meals, wore the same 3 pairs of scrubs for years, and made sure my boy had everything he needed. I believed in him. I believed he was going to be something special. And he was. At 16, Nathan built an app. I didn't understand it at first, something about connecting freelance workers with small businesses, automating payments, tracking hours. He'd stay up until 4 in the morning coding on a laptop I'd bought him for Christmas, the only gift I could afford that year. He didn't ask for much. He was quiet, focused, driven. And when that app started making money, real money, I thought we'd finally made it. I thought all those years of struggle were going to pay off. By the time Nathan turned 18, that app was worth $4 million. $4 million. I didn't touch a cent of it. It was his. He'd earned it. I was just proud. Proud and relieved and so grateful that my son wouldn't have to live the way I did. But here's the thing about money, it changes people. Or maybe it just reveals who they always were. Nathan started pulling away. He moved out, bought a penthouse in the city, started dating a woman named Victoria who wore heels sharper than her words and looked at me like I was dirt on her shoe. I tried to be happy for him. I tried to give him space. But then Theo was born, and for a brief, beautiful moment, I thought things might get better. I thought fatherhood would ground him. I thought he'd remember where he came from. I was wrong. Nathan and Victoria's marriage lasted 3 years. When it fell apart, she left. Just packed her bags and walked out, leaving Theo behind. And Nathan? Nathan wasn't equipped to be a father. He was too busy with investors, with meetings, with his new life. So he brought Theo to me. Said it was temporary. Said he just needed to get his head straight. I took that boy in without hesitation. Because that's what you do. You take care of your family. But temporary turned into months. Months turned into years. And Nathan stopped calling. Stopped visiting. Stopped pretending he cared. Until that day in the forest. We'd been living together for 2 years by then, me and Theo. Nathan had called out of the blue and said he wanted to take us on a trip. A family trip. He said he was sorry for being distant, that he wanted to reconnect. I was so desperate to believe him. So desperate to have my son back. So I said yes. He picked us up in a black SUV, windows tinted, smelling like expensive cologne and leather. Theo was so excited. He climbed into the back seat with his little backpack, chattering about camping and s'mores and whether we'd see any bears. I sat in the passenger seat and tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut that something was wrong. Nathan didn't talk much during the drive. His jaw was tight. His hands gripped the steering wheel too hard. I asked him if everything was okay, and he just nodded. Said he was fine. Said he was just tired. We drove for hours. The city faded into suburbs, suburbs into farmland, farmland into wilderness. The road got narrower. The trees got thicker. And then, without warning, Nathan pulled over onto a dirt path that barely qualified as a road. He stopped the car, turned off the engine, and just sat there. I asked him what we were doing. He didn't answer. He got out of the car, walked around to my side, and opened my door. His face was blank. Empty. Like he'd shut off some part of himself. "Get out," he said. I stared at him. "What?" "Get out. Both of you." Theo climbed out of the back seat, confused. "Dad, where are we going?" Nathan didn't look at him. He walked back to the driver's side, got in, and locked the doors. I ran to his window, pounded on the glass. "Nathan, Nathan, what are you doing?" He looked at me then. Really looked at me. And there was nothing in his eyes. No guilt. No sadness. Nothing. "I can't do this anymore," he said. His voice was flat. "I can't carry you. Either of you." And then he drove away. I screamed. I chased the car down that dirt road until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. Theo stood in the middle of the path, crying, calling for his father. But Nathan didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. We were alone. The sun was setting. The temperature was dropping. And I realized, with a cold, sickening clarity, that my son had left us there to fend for ourselves. Or worse. If you've ever felt that kind of terror, the kind that makes your hands shake and your throat close up, then you know what I'm talking about. And if you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. Because this story gets darker. And you're going to want to know what happened next. We started walking. I didn't know where we were, but I knew we couldn't stay there. Theo held my hand. He didn't cry anymore. He just walked, silent and pale. I tried to stay calm. Tried to think. But all I could hear was Nathan's voice in my head. "I can't carry you. Asterisk. Like we were burdens. Like we were nothing." It took us 4 hours to find a road. 4 hours of stumbling through the dark, tripping over roots, listening to the rustling in the trees and praying it wasn't something with teeth. When we finally saw headlights, I nearly collapsed with relief. A truck driver stopped. He took one look at us, dirty, shaking, exhausted, and didn't ask questions. He just drove us to the nearest town. We stayed in a motel that night. I used the last of my cash to pay for the room. Theo fell asleep immediately, curled up on the bed with his shoes still on. I sat in the chair by the window and stared at the parking lot and felt something inside me break. Not break like shatter. Break like harden. Like turn to stone. Because I realized something that night. I realized that I had spent 20 years loving a boy who had grown into a man who didn't love me back. Who didn't even see me as human. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was done. I was done being the victim. Done being the woman who sacrificed everything and got nothing. Done being weak. Nathan thought he could throw us away. Thought he could erase us. He was wrong. And I was going to make sure he knew it. The motel room smelled like cigarettes and bleach. The kind of place you don't stay unless you have no other choice. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in that stiff, uncomfortable chair and watched Theo breathe, his small chest rising and falling under the scratchy motel blanket. He looked so much like Nathan at that age. Same dark hair. Same sharp jawline starting to come in. Same quiet intensity. But Theo was different. Theo was kind. I made a promise to myself in that room. I promised that I would never let Nathan hurt this boy again. That I would build something for us, something solid, something safe. That I would survive this. And more than survive. I would win. But first, I had to get us home. I called my sister, Diane, the next morning. She lived 3 states away, but she was the only family I had left besides Nathan. She wired me enough money for bus tickets and told me I could stay with her until I got back on my feet. I didn't tell her what Nathan had done. Not yet. I couldn't put it into words without falling apart, and I needed to stay strong for Theo. The bus ride took 2 days. Theo stared out the window the whole time, not saying much. I knew he was processing what had happened, trying to make sense of it. How do you explain to a 10-year-old that his father abandoned him? That the man who was supposed to protect him left him in the middle of nowhere like he was garbage? You can't. So I didn't try. I just held his hand and told him we were going to be okay. And somehow, we were. Diane took us in without hesitation. She lived in a small house in Pennsylvania, just outside Pittsburgh. It wasn't much, but it was warm and clean and safe. She set up the guest room for Theo and gave me the couch. She didn't ask questions. She just made us soup and let us exist for a while. But I couldn't stay there forever. I needed a plan. I needed a job. I needed to rebuild. I started applying for nursing jobs, but it was harder than I expected. I'd been out of work for 2 years while I was taking care of Theo, and hospitals wanted someone younger, someone without gaps in their resume. I got rejection after rejection. But I kept going. I had no choice. Finally, I got a call from a nursing home about an hour outside the city. They were desperate for staff and willing to hire me on the spot. The pay was barely enough to cover rent and groceries, but it was something. I took it. I found a tiny apartment, 1 bedroom, no dishwasher, carpet that smelled faintly of mildew. Theo and I shared the bedroom. I slept on a pull-out couch I bought at a thrift store. It wasn't pretty, but it was ours. And slowly, we built a life. Theo started school. He was quiet at first, withdrawn. The other kids didn't know what to make of him. But he was smart, so smart it scared me sometimes. He'd come home with perfect test scores, with teachers' notes saying he was exceptionally gifted. He reminded me of Nathan at that age. And that terrified me, because I didn't want him to turn into the man Nathan had become. But Theo was different. He cared about people. He asked me how my day was. He helped with chores without being asked. He saved half his lunch money every week and tried to give it to me when he saw me counting bills at the kitchen table. I told him to keep it. Told him he didn't need to worry about money. But he did anyway. And I loved him for it. Years passed. We didn't hear from Nathan. Not a word. Not a phone call, not a text, not a birthday card. It was like he'd vanished. Or maybe it was like we'd vanished, and he was perfectly fine with that. I tried not to think about him. Tried not to let the anger eat me alive. But it was always there, simmering under the surface. Because every time I looked at Theo, I remembered what Nathan had done. Every time I worked a double shift and came home too exhausted to stand, I remembered that Nathan had $4 million and couldn't be bothered to help his own son. Every time Theo asked me why his dad didn't love him, I remembered that my son, my boy, the one I'd sacrificed everything for, had left us to die. And I wanted him to pay. But I didn't know how. I didn't have money. I didn't have connections. I was just a tired, broke woman trying to keep her grandson alive. So I waited. And I worked. And I watched Theo grow. By the time he was 16, Theo was 6 feet tall and built like his father. He had Nathan's sharp mind, but none of his cruelty. He was gentle. Thoughtful. He read constantly. Books about technology, about business, about how things worked. He spent hours on his laptop, teaching himself to code the way Nathan had. And one day, he told me he'd built something. It was an app. A simple one, he said. Something to help students organize their assignments and track their grades. He'd been working on it for months, tweaking it, testing it, making it better. He showed it to me, and I didn't understand half of what I was looking at. But I could see the pride in his eyes. The hope. I'm going to sell it, he said. I'm going to make money, Grandma. I'm going to take care of us. I told him he didn't have to. That he was 16, that he should be worrying about homework and prom and normal teenage things. But he just smiled at me, that quiet, determined smile, and said, "You took care of me. Now it's my turn." And he did. Within 6 months, Theo's app had been bought by a tech company for $150,000. It wasn't millions, but it was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. He put it in a savings account. He paid off my debt. He bought us a better apartment. He made sure I didn't have to work double shifts anymore. And I cried. I cried because I was so proud of him. Because he was everything Nathan should have been. Because this boy, this beautiful, brilliant boy, had saved us. But I also cried because I knew it wouldn't last. Because I knew, deep down, that Nathan would hear about this. That he would come back. That he would try to take what Theo had built. And I was right. 3 years later, Theo was 19. His app had been updated, expanded, and resold. He'd made smart investments. He'd turned that $150,000 into nearly $4 million. He was careful. Methodical. He didn't flaunt it. He just quietly built something real. And then Nathan showed up. It was a Tuesday. I was at work when I got the call from Theo. His voice was shaking. "Grandma," he said. "Dad's here." I felt my blood turn to ice. What? He's here. At the apartment. He has a lawyer with him. I didn't wait. I clocked out early, got in my car, and drove home so fast I'm surprised I didn't get pulled over. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. My mind was racing. Because I knew what Nathan wanted. I knew why he was there. He wanted Theo's money. When I got home, Nathan was sitting on our couch like he owned the place. He looked older. His hair was graying at the temples. He'd put on weight. But his eyes were the same, cold, calculating, empty. The lawyer was a sharp-looking man in an expensive suit. He had a briefcase full of papers and a smile that made my skin crawl. Theo was standing in the corner, arms crossed, staring at his father. He didn't look scared. He looked disgusted. "Eleanor," Nathan said, like we were old friends. Like he hadn't left us to die. "We need to talk." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw him out. But I kept my voice steady. "What do you want?" The lawyer stepped forward. "Miss Price, my client is here to discuss a financial matter involving his son, Theodore. As Theodore's biological father, Mr. Price has certain legal rights." "He has no rights," I snapped. "He abandoned his son. He left us in the middle of nowhere. He doesn't get to waltz back in here and pretend he's a father." Nathan didn't flinch. "I made mistakes. I'm trying to make things right. By taking his money." "It's my money," Nathan said. His voice was calm. Too calm. "I built the first app. Theo learned from me. Everything he has because of me. I'm just asking for what's fair." I stared at him. And in that moment, I understood. He didn't care about Theo. He didn't care about us. He just saw dollar signs. He saw an opportunity. And he was going to take it. The lawyer handed me a stack of papers. "Mr. Price is prepared to file a claim for a portion of Theodore's assets. We believe we have a strong case. But we'd prefer to settle this amicably." I looked at Theo. He was pale, his jaw clenched. But he didn't say anything. He just watched. And I knew, right then, that this was going to get ugly. If you're watching this and you've ever dealt with a lawyer, with a family member who tried to take what wasn't theirs, then you know how this feels. You know that sinking, helpless rage. And if you want to see how this ends, because trust me, it gets worse before it gets better, make sure you're subscribed. Hit that button. Check the description box for more stories like this. Because you're going to want to know what happened next. We got our own lawyer. A woman named Patricia Coleman who specialized in family law. She was tough, smart, and she didn't sugarcoat anything. "He has a case," she said. "Not a strong one, but a case. If he can prove that his early work laid the foundation for Theodore's app, he might be entitled to a portion of the profits. It's a stretch, but it's possible." I felt sick. "So we might lose." "It's hard to say. It'll depend on the judge. On the evidence. On how well we can prove that Theodore's work was independent of Nathan's." Theo was sitting next to me, silent. He'd barely spoken since Nathan showed up. I reached over and squeezed his hand. "We'll fight this," I said. "We'll fight him." But Theo just looked at me. And he said something that chilled me to the bone. "Just let him do anything." I didn't understand. Not yet. But I would. The lawsuit hit us like a freight train. Nathan's lawyer filed the paperwork within a week. The claim was for $2 million, half of what Theo had earned. The argument was simple. Nathan had been the original innovator. He had created the first app, the blueprint, the foundation. Theo had simply copied his father's work, refined it, and profited from it. Therefore, Nathan argued, he was entitled to a share. It was absurd. It was cruel. But it was also, legally speaking, not impossible. Patricia sat us down in her cramped office that smelled like coffee and old paper. She spread the documents across her desk and pointed to the sections that worried her most. "Here's the problem," she said. "Nathan's original app and Theo's app share some core similarities. Same market, connecting freelancers with businesses. Same basic interface structure. Nathan's lawyer is going to argue that Theo didn't create something new. He just repackaged his father's idea." "But that's not true," I said. My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Theo built his app from scratch. He taught himself everything. Nathan wasn't even in the picture." "I believe you," Patricia said. "But belief isn't evidence. We need to prove it. We need documentation, code samples, timestamps, anything that shows Theo's work was independent and original. Theo finally spoke. His voice was quiet, calm. I have everything. Patricia looked at him. Everything. He nodded. Every version of the code. Every iteration. Every late-night update. I kept records. I didn't think I'd need them, but I have them. I felt a flicker of hope. So we can prove it. Patricia hesitated. It helps. But Nathan's lawyer is good. He's going to argue that even if the code is different, the concept was stolen. And judges don't always understand technology. They see a father and a son, and they might assume the son learned from the father. It's an uphill battle. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the desk. But instead, I just sat there, numb, trying to process the fact that my son, the boy I'd raised, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, was trying to steal from his own child. The legal process dragged on for months. Depositions. Motions. Paperwork stacked so high I couldn't see the end of it. Nathan played the role of the wronged father perfectly. He showed up to every hearing in tailored suits, hair slicked back, looking every bit the successful entrepreneur. He spoke about how proud he was of Theo, how he just wanted what was fair, how he believed family should support each other. It made me sick. Theo, on the other hand, refused to engage. He answered questions when asked, provided documentation when needed, but otherwise stayed silent. He didn't defend himself. He didn't argue. He just watched his father with those dark, unreadable eyes. I didn't understand it. I wanted him to fight back. To tell the judge what Nathan had done, how he'd abandoned us, how he'd left us to die in the middle of nowhere. But every time I brought it up, Theo just shook his head. It won't matter, he said. The judge doesn't care about what happened 5 years ago. They only care about the money. Then we make them care. I snapped. I was unraveling. The stress was eating me alive. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nathan's face. Heard his voice. I can't carry you. But Theo just looked at me with that same calm expression. Trust me, Grandma. Just let him do anything. Those words again. Just let him do anything. I didn't understand. But I was too exhausted to argue. The months turned into a year. The legal fees were staggering. Patricia was good, but she wasn't cheap. Theo paid for everything, draining his savings bit by bit. I hated it. Hated that Nathan was taking from us even before the case was decided. Hated that we were spending money we'd earned through hard work to defend ourselves against a man who'd done nothing but hurt us. And then, one day, Patricia called us into her office. Her face was grim. They've offered a settlement, she said. I felt my stomach drop. How much? $1 million. Nathan drops the case, and Theo pays him $1 million. I looked at Theo. He didn't react. Just stared at Patricia, expression blank. That's insane, I said. He doesn't deserve a cent. I agree, Patricia said. But it might be our best option. If we go to trial, there's a real chance we lose. And if we lose, the judge could award Nathan even more. So we just give him the money. My voice cracked. We just let him win. It's not about winning or losing, Eleanor. It's about protecting Theo's assets. $1 million is a lot, but it's better than 2. And it ends this. No more legal fees. No more stress. It's over. I turned to Theo. He was staring at the floor, jaw clenched. For the first time since this nightmare started, he looked angry. No, he said. Patricia blinked. No. No settlement. We go to trial. Theo, I started, but he cut me off. He doesn't get to do this. He doesn't get to walk away with $1 million for doing nothing. I don't care if we lose. I don't care if it costs everything. We fight. I stared at my grandson. And for the first time, I saw Nathan in him. Not the cruelty. Not the emptiness. But the stubbornness. The refusal to back down. Patricia sighed. All right. If that's what you want. But I need you to understand the risks. If we lose. I know, Theo said. I know what happens if we lose. And so we went to trial. The courtroom was cold and sterile. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The judge was a middle-aged man with silver hair and glasses that made him look perpetually skeptical. Nathan sat on one side with his lawyer, looking confident and composed. We sat on the other, and I felt like we were walking into a trap. The trial lasted 3 days. Nathan's lawyer painted a picture of a devoted father who had inspired his son, only to be cast aside once the son found success. He pulled up side-by-side comparisons of the two apps, pointing out similarities in design and functionality. He called witnesses, people who'd known Nathan back when he first built his app, who testified that Nathan had always talked about expanding his business, about creating something bigger. It was a performance. A calculated, polished performance. And it was working. I could see it in the judge's face. He was listening. He was considering. Then it was our turn. Patricia called Theo to the stand. He walked up calmly, hands in his pockets, and sat down like he was sitting in a classroom. Patricia asked him about his app. About how he'd built it. About the hours he'd spent learning to code, the nights he'd stayed up debugging, the process of pitching to investors. Theo answered every question clearly, methodically. He didn't get defensive. He didn't get emotional. He just stated the facts. And then Nathan's lawyer stood up for cross-examination. "Mr. Price," he said, circling Theo like a shark. "You admire your father, don't you?" Theo paused. "I used to." "You looked up to him. You wanted to be like him." "When I was younger, yes." "And you knew about his app. You knew he'd built something successful." "Everyone knew. It was public knowledge." "So you took inspiration from him?" "No," Theo said. His voice was steady. "I learned from the internet. From textbooks. From trial and error. My father had nothing to do with my app. But you can't deny the similarities. Lots of apps have similarities. That doesn't mean they're the same." Nathan's lawyer smiled. "Your father claims you owe your success to him. That without his foundation, you'd have nothing. What do you say to that?" Theo looked at Nathan. Really looked at him. And for a moment, the courtroom was silent. "I say," Theo said slowly, "that my father abandoned me when I was 10 years old. He left me and my grandmother in the middle of a forest and drove away. He didn't call. He didn't check on us. He didn't care if we lived or died. So no. I don't owe him anything." The courtroom erupted. Nathan's lawyer objected. The judge banged his gavel. Patricia looked stunned. But Theo just sat there, calm, staring at his father. And Nathan? Nathan looked away. The judge ordered a recess. We filed out of the courtroom, and I grabbed Theo's arm. "Why didn't you tell me you were going to say that?" I whispered. "Because I needed to say it to him," Theo said. "Not to you." And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about the money. It was about making Nathan face what he'd done. About forcing him to hear the truth. But I still didn't know if it would be enough. If you're still here, if you're invested in this story, then do me a favor. Leave a comment. Tell me you're here. Tell me you want to know what happens. Because this is where it gets real. And you're not going to believe what comes next. Check the description box for more stories like this. Stories of people who refused to stay down, who fought back, who won. Because that's what we're doing here. We're winning. The judge came back with his ruling 2 days later. We sat in that courtroom, hands clasped, hearts pounding. Patricia looked tense. Nathan looked smug. And the judge said the words I'd been dreading. "I find in favor of the plaintiff." My heart stopped. The room spun. I heard Patricia gasp beside me. Nathan's lawyer smiled. But the judge wasn't finished. "However," he continued, "the amount awarded will be significantly less than requested. I find that while there are superficial similarities between the two applications, Mr. Theodore Price's work is sufficiently original and independent. Mr. Nathan Price is awarded $200,000, not $2 million. It was a compromise. A slap on the wrist. But it was still a loss. Nathan stood up, shook his lawyer's hand. He didn't even look at us. Theo just sat there, staring. And then he smiled. It was a small smile. A knowing smile. And I didn't understand it. Not yet. But I would. The $200,000 judgment felt like a punch to the gut. It wasn't the $2 million Nathan had wanted, but it was still a victory for him. He'd walked into our lives after years of silence, sued his own son, and walked away with a check. I watched him leave the courtroom that day, his lawyer beside him, both of them talking in low, satisfied tones. Nathan didn't even glance back at us. I wanted to chase him down. I wanted to scream at him, to make him see what he'd done. But Theo grabbed my arm and held me back. "Let him go," he said quietly. "How can you say that?" I was shaking. "He just took $200,000 from you. Money you earned. Money you worked for." "I know," Theo said. And he smiled again. That strange, calm smile that made me uneasy. "Let him take it." I didn't understand. Not then. But over the next few weeks, I started to piece it together. Theo didn't seem upset about the ruling. He went about his life as if nothing had happened. He paid Nathan the $200,000 without complaint. He updated his app, took meetings with investors, continued building his business. He was focused, driven. But there was something different about him. Something I couldn't quite name. He was waiting for something. I didn't know what. But I could feel it in the air, like the static before a storm. And then, one evening, Theo came home with a laptop and a stack of papers. He set them on the kitchen table and looked at me. "Grandma," he said, "I need to show you something." I sat down. He opened the laptop and pulled up a series of files. Bank statements, transaction records, email chains. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. But as Theo walked me through it, piece by piece, my blood ran cold. Nathan had been stealing. Not from Theo. From his own company. Theo had done his homework. Over the past year, while Nathan was busy suing us, Theo had been quietly investigating his father. He'd hired a forensic accountant, someone discreet, someone good, and had them dig into Nathan's business records. And what they found was damning. Nathan's company, the one built on the original app, was hemorrhaging money. He'd been embezzling funds for years. Fake invoices. Phantom contractors. Money funneled into offshore accounts. He'd been living beyond his means, and when the money ran out, he'd turned to fraud. "He's broke," Theo said. "Or he will be soon. The company's on the verge of collapse. That's why he came after me. He needed money, and he thought I'd be an easy target." I stared at the screen. At the evidence laid out in neat, damning rows. "How long have you known?" "Since the beginning," Theo said. "I suspected something was off when he first showed up. So I started digging. And I found this." "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell Patricia? We could have used this in court." "Because I didn't want to," Theo said. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. A coldness. If I'd exposed him in court, he would have been arrested. Charged. Probably sent to prison. And that would have been the end of it. He would have lost everything, but so would I. I would have spent years watching him rot in a cell, and it wouldn't have felt like enough. I stared at my grandson. This boy I'd raised. This boy I thought I knew. "So what are you going to do?" I asked. Theo smiled. "I'm going to give him exactly what he wants." I didn't understand. Not until Theo explained the plan. And when he did, I realized just how much like Nathan he really was. Not in cruelty, but in calculation. In patience. In the willingness to play the long game. Theo had let Nathan win the lawsuit. Had let him take the $200,000. Because that money was bait. Nathan thought he'd gotten away with it. Thought he'd outsmarted us. But what he didn't know was that Theo had been watching. Waiting. Gathering evidence. And now, Theo was going to destroy him. The plan was simple. Theo would wait until Nathan's company collapsed under the weight of its own fraud. Then, when Nathan was desperate, when he'd burned through the $200,000 and had nowhere left to turn, Theo would go public with the evidence. He'd send it to the SEC. To the press. To every investor Nathan had ever swindled. Nathan wouldn't just lose his money. He'd lose his reputation. His freedom. Everything. "But that could take years," I said. "Are you really willing to wait that long?" Theo nodded. "I've already waited 9 years. I can wait a little longer." I looked at this boy, this young man, and felt something shift inside me. Pride. Yes. But also fear. Because I recognized that look in his eyes. That cold, patient determination. It was the same look Nathan had when he drove away from us in that forest. The same emptiness. "Theo," I said carefully, "this isn't who you are. You're not like him. I know, he said. I'm better. And that's what scared me most. Over the following months, we watched Nathan's world begin to crumble. It started small. A business partner pulled out of a deal. An investor asked questions about discrepancies in the books. Nathan tried to patch the holes, to keep up appearances, but the cracks were showing. Theo tracked it all. He had alerts set up, monitoring every news article, every SEC filing, every social media post related to Nathan's company. He showed me updates like other people showed vacation photos. Dispassionate. Clinical. He fired 3 employees last week, Theo would say. Cost-cutting measures. His panicking. Or, his CTO quit. Took half the development team with him. The app's going to fall apart without them. I wanted to feel something. Satisfaction. Maybe. Justice. But all I felt was hollow. Because this wasn't justice. This was revenge. And revenge, I was learning, doesn't feel the way you think it will. But Theo was committed. And I couldn't stop him. Didn't know if I even wanted to. Then, 6 months after the trial, everything changed. Nathan called me. I was at work when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something made me answer. And there he was. My son. The man who'd left us to die. His voice was rough, strained. Mom, he said. And that single word, mom, nearly broke me. Because I hadn't heard him call me that in almost a decade. What do you want, Nathan? My voice was ice. I need help. I almost laughed. You need help? That's rich. I'm serious. The company's in trouble. I'm in trouble. I know I don't deserve to ask, but I need money. Just enough to keep things afloat until. Until what? I snapped. Until you can steal more? Until you can scam someone else? Silence. Then, you know. Theo knows. He's known for months. And he's going to bury you with it. I heard Nathan's breathing quicken. He can't. Mom, if that information gets out, I'll lose everything. I'll go to prison. Good, I said. And I meant it. You deserve it. Please. His voice cracked. I know I've made mistakes. I know I hurt you. Both of you. But I'm still your son. Doesn't that count for something? And there it was. The question I'd been avoiding for 9 years. Did it count for something? Did those 20 years of raising him, of sacrificing for him, of loving him, did any of that matter now? I thought about the forest. About Theo's small hand in mine as we stumbled through the dark. About the motel room and the bus ride and the years of struggle. About every moment Nathan could have been there and chose not to be. No, I said. It doesn't count for anything. And I hung up. I told Theo about the call that night. He listened without expression, then nodded once. It's time, he said. Time for what? To finish it. The next morning, Theo made a series of calls. To the SEC. To a journalist he'd been cultivating at the Wall Street Journal. To several of Nathan's investors. He sent them everything. Every document, every transaction record, every piece of evidence he'd compiled. Within 48 hours, the story broke. Tech entrepreneur Nathan Price under investigation for embezzlement and fraud, the headline read. The article laid it all out. The fake invoices. The offshore accounts. The years of deception. Nathan's company stock plummeted. His investors filed lawsuits. The SEC opened a formal investigation. Nathan was ruined. I should have felt vindicated. Triumphant. But instead, I felt sick. Because I kept thinking about the boy Nathan used to be. The quiet teenager who stayed up late coding, who hugged me tight when I worked double shifts, who promised he'd take care of me when he made it big. Where had that boy gone? When had he turned into this? Theo, meanwhile, seemed satisfied. He read the articles with a small smile, watching his father's empire collapse in real time. He didn't gloat. Didn't celebrate. Just observed, like a scientist watching an experiment unfold. Aren't you happy? I asked him one evening. We were sitting in our apartment, the glow of his laptop screen the only light in the room. Happy? Theo looked at me, genuinely confused. No, I'm not happy. Then why did you do it? Because it needed to be done, he said simply. He hurt us. He hurt other people. He needed to face consequences. But you're not happy about it. Grandma, Theo said slowly, revenge doesn't make you happy. It just makes things even. And I realized he was right. This whole time, I'd thought revenge would feel good. That seeing Nathan suffer would heal something inside me. But it didn't. It just left me empty, tired. But we weren't done yet. Because Nathan, even ruined, still had one move left to make. 3 weeks after the story broke, Nathan showed up at our apartment again. No lawyer this time. No expensive suit. Just a broken man in jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt, eyes red-rimmed, face gaunt. Theo answered the door. I stood behind him, ready to slam it shut if needed. What do you want? Theo asked. His voice was flat. Nathan looked at his son. Really looked at him. And I saw something in his face I hadn't seen in years. Regret. Real, genuine regret. I came to say I'm sorry, Nathan said. His voice was hoarse. I know it doesn't mean anything. I know I can't undo what I've done. But I needed you to hear me say it. I'm sorry. For everything. Theo stared at him. Silent. I was a coward, Nathan continued. I left you in that forest because I was terrified. Terrified of being a father. Terrified of failing. And I told myself it was the right thing to do. That you'd be better off without me. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. You're right, Theo said. We were better off without you. Nathan flinched like he'd been slapped. I know. I wanted you to know that I see it now. What I did. Who I became. And I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back my childhood, Theo said. It doesn't give Grandma back the years she spent struggling because of you. It doesn't undo the lawsuits or the lies or the fact that you tried to steal from me. I know. So why are you here? Nathan looked down. Because you're my son. And I love you. And I needed you to know that before everything ends. There was something in his tone. Something final. And I felt a chill run down my spine. What do you mean, before everything ends? I asked. Nathan looked at me. And I saw it. The resignation. The defeat. They're going to arrest me next week. The SEC finished their investigation. I'm looking at 10 to 15 years. 10 to 15 years. I tried to feel something. Satisfaction. Justice. But all I felt was sad. For the boy Nathan used to be. For the man he'd become. For all of us. Good, Theo said. His voice was cold. You deserve it. Nathan nodded slowly. Yeah, I do. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, you turned out better than me. Better than I ever could have been. Your grandmother did a good job. And then he walked away. Theo closed the door. We stood there in silence. And then, for the first time since this whole nightmare started, Theo cried. Not loud, heaving sobs. Just quiet tears streaming down his face. I pulled him into a hug, this boy who'd become a man, this boy who'd been so strong for so long. And I let him cry. I hate him, Theo whispered. But he's still my dad. I know, I said. I know. And I did. Because Nathan was still my son. My broken, terrible, ruined son. And some part of me, some stupid, stubborn part, still loved him. Still mourned the boy he used to be. But I also knew that love wasn't enough. That forgiveness wasn't deserved. That some things couldn't be fixed. Nathan was arrested the following week. The news covered it extensively. Former tech darling faces fraud charges. There were photos of him in handcuffs, head down, being led into a courthouse. Theo didn't watch. He deleted his news alerts, closed his laptop, and said, "It's over." But it wasn't. Not really. Because 2 months later, we got a visitor. She was a woman in her early 40s, professionally dressed, with kind eyes and a tired smile. She introduced herself as Victoria, Nathan's ex-wife. Theo's mother. The woman who'd abandoned him when he was 7. Theo stared at her like she was a ghost. "What are you doing here?" "I heard about Nathan," Victoria said. "About everything. And I wanted to see you. To see if you were okay." "Now you want to know if I'm okay?" Theo's voice was sharp. "Where were you 10 years ago?" Victoria's face fell. I know I don't have the right to be here. But I've thought about you every day since I left. And I couldn't stay away anymore. You left me, Theo said. His voice broke. You both left me. And Grandma was the only one who stayed. Victoria looked at me. I know. And I can never repay her for that. But I want to try. I want to be in your life, if you'll let me. Theo shook his head. It's too late. Maybe, Victoria said. But I have to try. And that's when I realized something. This story, this nightmare, wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about money or lawsuits or justice. It was about abandonment. About what it does to people. About the scars it leaves. Nathan had abandoned us. Victoria had abandoned us. And they'd both spent years running from the consequences. But consequences have a way of catching up. Theo didn't let Victoria into his life. Not then. But she kept trying. Sending letters. Calling. Showing up at birthdays and holidays, even when she wasn't invited. Slowly, over the course of a year, Theo started responding. Started talking to her. Started, maybe, to forgive. And I watched it happen. Watched my grandson learn to let go of the anger. To heal. To move forward. Nathan, meanwhile, was sentenced to 12 years in prison. I never visited him. Never wrote to him. Never spoke his name. He was dead to me. Had been since the day he drove away. But Theo visited him once. Just once. He came home and told me they talked. That Nathan had apologized again. That he seemed different. Broken. But different. Do you forgive him? I asked. Theo thought about it. No. But I don't hate him anymore either. And that's enough. And maybe that's all any of us can hope for. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just the absence of hate. Just peace. If you're still with me, if this story has resonated with you, if you've seen yourself in our pain, then leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your story. And check the description box below for more stories like this. Because we all have scars. We all have betrayals we're trying to survive. And sometimes, knowing you're not alone is enough. Life has a way of continuing even after the worst has happened. The earth keeps spinning. The sun keeps rising. And you keep breathing, even when you're not sure you want to. That's what the months after Nathan's sentencing felt like. Like we were all just breathing. Existing. Trying to figure out who we were now that the war was over. Theo threw himself into his work. His app continued to grow. He hired a team. Expanded into new markets. Made smart investments. By the time he turned 21, he'd rebuilt what he'd lost in legal fees and then some. He was successful. Respected. Everything Nathan had once been, but without the rot underneath. But success has a price. And Theo was paying it. He stopped sleeping well. I'd hear him up at 3 in the morning, pacing in his room, typing on his laptop. He stopped eating regularly. Lost weight. Got quiet in a way that worried me. Because it wasn't the calm quiet he usually had. It was the empty quiet. The kind that came from burning out from the inside. I tried to talk to him about it. Tried to get him to slow down, to take care of himself. But he'd just smile that same tight smile and say he was fine. He wasn't fine. Victoria noticed it too. She'd been around more, tentatively at first, then more regularly. Theo had allowed her back into his life in small increments. A coffee here. A lunch there. She was trying, genuinely trying, to make up for lost time. And I could see the toll it took on her, the weight of her guilt. One evening, she pulled me aside after dinner. "He's not okay," she said quietly. "You see it too, right?" I nodded. "I've seen it for months. But he won't talk to me about it." "He's carrying too much," Victoria said. "All of this, Nathan, the lawsuit, the revenge, it's eating him alive. And he's too proud to admit it." She was right. And I didn't know how to fix it. Because how do you fix someone who spent their entire adolescence learning to be strong, to never break, to never need help? The answer came from an unexpected place. It was late November. Nearly 10 years to the day since Nathan had left us in that forest. I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard a crash from Theo's room. I ran in and found him sitting on the floor, surrounded by broken glass from a shattered picture frame. His hands were shaking. His face was pale. "Theo." I dropped to my knees beside him. "What happened?" He didn't answer. just stared at the broken glass. At the photo that had been inside the frame, a picture of him and Nathan from when Theo was 5, both of them grinning at the camera, Nathan's arm around his son's shoulders. "I can't do this anymore," Theo whispered. "Can't do what?" "Pretend I'm okay. Pretend it doesn't hurt. Pretend I'm not." He stopped. Swallowed hard. "Pretend I'm not broken." My heart shattered. "You're not broken." "Yes, I am," he said. And his voice was so small. So lost. "He broke me, Grandma. When he left us in that forest, he broke something inside me. And I've been trying to fix it ever since. I thought if I was successful enough, smart enough, strong enough, it would stop hurting. But it doesn't. It still hurts." I pulled him into my arms. This boy I'd raised. This man I loved more than anything in the world. And I let him cry. Really cry. Not the quiet tears from before, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere primal and raw. "It's okay," I whispered. "It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to not be okay." I wanted to make him suffer, Theo said between sobs. I wanted him to lose everything. And he did. He lost everything. But it didn't make me feel better. It just made me feel empty. "I know," I said. "Revenge does that. So what do I do now?" I pulled back and looked at him. At this beautiful, brilliant, broken boy. "You heal," I said. "You let go. You forgive yourself for being human." "I don't know how." "Neither do I admitted. "But we'll figure it out together." And we did. Slowly. Painfully. But we did. Theo started seeing a therapist. It took me weeks to convince him, but he finally agreed. At first, he resisted. Sat in sessions with his arms crossed, giving one-word answers. But gradually, he opened up. Started talking about the abandonment. About the fear. About the anger he'd been carrying for so long. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Reeves, helped him understand something crucial. That what Nathan had done wasn't Theo's fault. That being abandoned didn't mean he was unlovable. That being hurt didn't make him weak. It sounds simple. Obvious, even. But for someone who'd spent a decade believing the opposite, it was revolutionary. I watched Theo change over the following months. He smiled more. Real smiles, not the tight, performative ones. He started taking days off. Started seeing friends. Started, slowly, to let go of the weight he'd been carrying. Victoria and I grew closer too. We'd spent so many years as enemies, her the woman who'd abandoned my grandson, me the grandmother who'd picked up the pieces. But grief has a way of breaking down walls. We started having coffee together. Talking. Sharing stories about Theo, about Nathan, about the ways we'd both failed and tried to make up for it. "I was so young when I had him," Victoria told me one afternoon. "We were sitting in my apartment, rain pattering against the windows. 23. I had no idea what I was doing. And Nathan was already changing. Already pulling away. I thought if I left, if I gave him space, maybe he'd come back to himself. But he never did." "You should have taken Theo with you," I said. Not accusatory. Just factual. "I know," Victoria said. Her eyes were wet. "I tell myself I was too unstable. Too broke. Too messed up. But the truth is, I was a coward. I ran because it was easier than staying. And I've regretted it every day since." I looked at this woman, this person I'd spent years hating, and realized she was just as broken as the rest of us. Just as human. "He's starting to forgive you," I said. "It's slow. But it's happening." Victoria smiled through her tears. "I don't deserve it." "Maybe not," I said. "But he's giving it anyway. That's who he is." And it was true. Theo had a capacity for forgiveness that I didn't possess. He'd forgiven Victoria, at least partially. He'd even found a way to make peace with what Nathan had done, if not with Nathan himself. Me? I was still working on it. I thought about Nathan sometimes. Wondered how he was doing in prison. If he was remorseful. If he thought about us. If he regretted the choices that had led him there. But I never reached out. Never wrote. Never visited. Because some betrayals are too deep to forgive. Some wounds don't heal, they just scar over. And that has to be okay too. 1 year after Nathan's sentencing, Theo sold his company. He'd built it into something worth $20 million, and he walked away from it. Said he needed a change. Needed to do something that mattered beyond making money. He started a nonprofit. An organization that helped kids from broken homes get access to education and technology. Kids like him. Kids who'd been abandoned or abused or forgotten. He poured his heart into it. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I saw him genuinely happy. This is what I was supposed to do, he told me one evening. We were at the nonprofit's office, a small, bright space filled with computers and hope. Not revenge. Not success. This. Helping people who need it. I hugged him. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of me too, he said. And he meant it. Victoria joined the nonprofit as a volunteer. She worked with the kids, sharing her own story of mistakes and redemption. She and Theo weren't close, not in the way a mother and son should be, but they were building something. A relationship based on honesty and effort rather than obligation. And me? I finally retired. Hung up my scrubs after 40 years of nursing and let myself rest. Theo bought me a small house, nothing fancy, just a quiet place with a garden and a porch swing. I spent my days reading, gardening, and watching my grandson change the world in small, meaningful ways. Life was good. Not perfect. Not healed. But good. And then, 2 years after Nathan's sentencing, I got a call from the prison. Nathan had collapsed during recreation time. Heart attack. He was in the hospital, critical condition. They didn't know if he'd survive. I hung up the phone and sat in silence, trying to figure out what I felt. Sadness. Relief. Guilt. All of it. None of it. Everything. I called Theo. Told him what happened. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Do you want to go see him? I asked. Another pause. Then, do you? I thought about it. Thought about the boy Nathan had been. The man he'd become. The son I'd lost long before he went to prison. No, I said. I don't. Me neither, Theo said. And I heard the finality in his voice. The closure. Nathan survived the heart attack. Recovered. Went back to serving his sentence. I didn't visit. Didn't call. Didn't send a card. And I was okay with that. Because forgiveness isn't mandatory. Healing doesn't require reconciliation. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself is let go and walk away. Theo understood that. He'd moved on. Built a life that wasn't defined by what Nathan had done. And watching him thrive, watching him help other kids avoid the pain he'd endured, was the best revenge I could have asked for. Not revenge against Nathan. Revenge against the idea that abandonment defines you. That trauma wins. That brokenness is permanent. Theo proved that wrong every single day. And so did I. If you've made it this far, if you're still listening, then thank you. Thank you for hearing our story. For understanding that survival isn't pretty or perfect, but it's real. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who's been abandoned, betrayed, broken, share this story with them. Let them know they're not alone. And check the description box below for more stories of survival and strength. Because we all need reminders that we can make it through. There are places in your life that mark you. Places that change who you are so fundamentally that you can never go back to being the person you were before. For me, that place was the forest. For 10 years, I didn't talk about it. Didn't think about it. Pushed it down so deep that I could almost pretend it never happened. But trauma doesn't stay buried. It seeps up through the cracks when you least expect it. It was Theo's idea to go back. We were having dinner, just the two of us, when he brought it up. He'd been doing well. The non-profit was thriving. He was sleeping better, laughing more, living more. But there was still something in his eyes sometimes. A shadow. A question. I want to go back to the forest, he said suddenly. I looked up from my plate. What? The forest. Where he left us. I want to go back. My stomach dropped. Why? I don't know, Theo said. I need to see it. Need to face it. My therapist thinks it might help. Closure, or whatever. I wanted to say no. Wanted to tell him that some doors should stay closed. But I looked at this man, my grandson, my boy, and saw that he needed this. That he couldn't move forward until he'd gone back. Okay, I said. We'll go. So we went. It took us 2 weeks to figure out where exactly Nathan had left us. The memory was hazy. I'd been so focused on survival that I hadn't paid attention to landmarks or road names. But Theo, brilliant as always, managed to track it down using old cell tower data and GPS coordinates from the day it happened. The drive out was quiet. Neither of us spoke much. Victoria had offered to come, but Theo said no. This was something we needed to do alone. Just the two of us. The way it had been that day. When we pulled off onto that dirt road, my hands started shaking. I remembered it. The trees. The way the light filtered through the leaves. The smell of pine and earth. We got out of the car and stood there. The forest was just as I remembered it. Thick. Dark. Indifferent. This is it, Theo said quietly. I nodded. Couldn't speak. We walked down the path, retracing the steps we'd taken a decade ago. It looked different in daylight. Less menacing. Just trees and rocks and dirt. But I could still feel it. The terror. The confusion. The overwhelming sense of abandonment. Theo stopped at a specific spot. A clearing where the trees opened up just enough to let in sunlight. This is where we were standing, he said. When he drove away. Right here. I looked at him. He was staring at the ground, jaw clenched, hands in his pockets. I remember thinking he'd come back, Theo said. His voice was distant. I kept telling myself he was just testing us. That he'd circle around and pick us up. That it was some kind of lesson. But he didn't come back. And I realized he didn't love me. That's not true, I said automatically. Yes, it is, Theo said. He looked at me, and his eyes were wet. He didn't love me, Grandma. Not the way a father should. Maybe he loved the idea of me. But not me. Not the real me. I wanted to argue. Wanted to defend Nathan, to say that love is complicated, that people make mistakes. But I couldn't. Because Theo was right. I'm sorry, I said. I'm so sorry you had to learn that. Me too, Theo said. And then he did something unexpected. He smiled. But you know what? I'm glad it happened. I stared at him. What? I'm glad he left us here, Theo said. Because if he hadn't, I wouldn't have grown up with you. I wouldn't have learned what real love looks like. I wouldn't have become who I am. So yeah, I'm glad. And in that moment, standing in that forest, I understood something. Trauma can break you. But it can also rebuild you. Into something stronger. Something better. We stood there for a long time. Just breathing. Just being. And then Theo reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. It was old, crumpled. I recognized it immediately. It was a drawing Theo had made when he was 10. A picture of him and Nathan, holding hands, smiling. He'd kept it all these years. I don't need this anymore, Theo said. And he tore it up. Let the pieces scatter on the wind. Watched them disappear into the trees. I forgive him, Theo said quietly. Not because he deserves it. But because I deserve to be free. I started crying. Couldn't help it. Because I realized I needed to do the same thing. I'd been carrying Nathan with me for 10 years. His betrayal. His cruelty. His absence. I'd let him define me. Let him take up space in my head and my heart. But standing there, watching those pieces of paper blow away, I realized I could let go too. I forgive him, I said. And I meant it. Not for Nathan. For me. We stood there until the sun started to set. Until the forest began to look the way it had that day. And then we walked back to the car, got in, and drove away. This time, we left on our own terms. The drive home was different. Lighter. Like we'd left something behind in those woods. Something heavy and dark that we didn't need anymore. Thank you, Theo said as we pulled into the driveway. For what? For never giving up on me. For being there when no one else was. For showing me what love actually looks like. I reached over and squeezed his hand. You never have to thank me for that. I know, he said. But I want to. That night, I slept better than I had in years. No nightmares. No memories clawing at me in the dark. Just peace. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Theo. It was a photo. Him standing in front of the nonprofit's new building, a bigger space they'd just purchased. Kids everywhere. Smiling. Learning. Thriving. The text read, Asterisk, this is what healing looks like. Asterisk. And he was right. Over the next few months, I watched Theo bloom. He started dating someone, a kind, gentle person who made him laugh. He took up painting. He traveled. He lived. Not in spite of what had happened, but because of it. Because he'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to him and turned it into fuel for something beautiful. And I did the same. I volunteered at the nonprofit. Spent time with the kids. Told them my story, not the pretty version, but the real one. The one about struggle and survival and finding your way through the dark. And I saw myself in their eyes. Saw the same fear and doubt and hope. And I told them what I wish someone had told me. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become. Victoria became a permanent fixture in our lives. She and I weren't friends, not exactly. But we were something. Allies, maybe. Two women who'd loved the same broken man and survived him. One afternoon, she asked me something I'd been wondering myself. Do you think he's different now? In prison, I mean. Do you think he's changed? I thought about it. I don't know. Maybe. But it doesn't matter. Doesn't it? No, I said. Because whether he's changed or not doesn't change what he did. Doesn't undo the hurt. He has to live with that. We don't. Victoria nodded slowly. I hope he has changed, though. For his sake. Me too, I said. And I surprised myself by meaning it. Not because I wanted Nathan back in our lives. But because I wanted him to be better. To grow. To understand what he'd lost. But that was his journey. Not ours. We were on a different path now. A better one. And we were never looking back. If you're someone who's struggling to let go of something, someone who's holding on to pain because you think you have to, I want you to know something. You don't. You can choose to forgive. Not for them. For you. And if you need to hear more stories like this, stories of people who let go and found peace, check the description box below. Because you're not alone. And you're stronger than you think. 3 years after Nathan went to prison, I got a letter from his lawyer. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. Part of me wanted to throw it away. To not engage. But curiosity won. Inside was a formal letter stating that Nathan had updated his will. That he'd named Theo and me as his beneficiaries. That when he died, everything he had left would go to us. Everything he had left amounted to almost nothing. The house had been foreclosed. The cars repossessed. The bank accounts drained by legal fees and restitution payments. All that remained was a safety deposit box and a small life insurance policy. The letter said that Nathan wanted us to have it. That it was the only thing he could give us now. I called Theo and read him the letter over the phone. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, do you want it? I don't know, I said honestly. Part of me says no. Part of me says it's the least he owes us. What's in the safety deposit box? It doesn't say. Another pause. I think we should look. Not because we want anything from him. But because. I don't know. Closure, maybe. So we went to the bank. The lawyer met us there, handed us the key, and showed us to the vault. The safety deposit box was small. Unassuming. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were 3 things, an old photo album, a stack of letters, and a small velvet box. Theo pulled out the photo album first. It was filled with pictures I'd never seen. Nathan as a baby. As a toddler. As a young boy. Pictures of him and me. Me holding him, helping him with homework, cheering at his soccer games. Pictures of a life I'd almost forgotten. He kept these, Theo said softly. All this time. The letters were addressed to me. And to Theo. Dozens of them. All sealed. All undelivered. I opened one with trembling hands. Asterisk dear mom asterisk. Asterisk I don't know how to say this. I don't know how to explain what I've done or why I've done it. But I need you to know that I think about you every day. About you and Theo. About the life I destroyed. Asterisk. Asterisk I tell myself I had reasons. That I was overwhelmed. That I was scared. But the truth is, I was selfish. I saw you two as obligations. As weights. And I ran. Asterisk. Asterisk I can't undo it. Can't take it back. But I want you to know I'm sorry. So sorry. And I love you. I always have. I just didn't know how to show it. Asterisk. There were more letters like this. Years' worth. All saying the same thing in different ways. Apologies. Regrets. Confessions of guilt and shame. Letters he'd written but never sent because he was too much of a coward to face us. I read them all. Every single one. And with each letter, I felt something inside me shift. Not forgiveness, not quite, but understanding. Because these letters showed me something I hadn't seen before. Nathan had been suffering too. Not in the way we had, but in his own way. Living with the weight of what he'd done. Knowing he'd destroyed the only people who'd ever truly loved him. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it explained it. Theo read his letters silently. His face was unreadable. When he finished, he carefully folded them and put them back in the box. He was broken, Theo said quietly. Just like us. Just in a different way. I nodded. Couldn't speak. The last item was the velvet box. Inside was a ring. A simple gold band. My wedding ring, the one I'd worn when I was married to Nathan's father. The one I'd sold years ago when I needed money for groceries. There was a note tucked under it. Asterisk, I bought this back 5 years ago. Found it in a pawn shop. I wanted to return it to you. Wanted to give you back something I'd taken. But I never had the courage. I'm sorry for that too. For all of it. Asterisk. I stared at that ring. At this small, inadequate gesture. And I started laughing. Not happy laughter. The kind that comes when you don't know whether to cry or scream. He bought back your ring, Theo said. He sounded as bewildered as I felt. He bought back my ring, I repeated. After everything. After ruining our lives. After stealing from you. After going to prison. He bought back my ring. It was absurd. Meaningless in the grand scheme of things. But also, not. Because it meant he'd been thinking about us. About the damage he'd caused. About the things he'd taken that couldn't be replaced. I slipped the ring on. It still fit. After all these years, it still fit. What do we do with all this? Theo asked, gesturing to the letters and photos. We keep them, I said. Not because we owe him anything, but because it's part of our story. And our story includes him. The good and the bad. Theo nodded slowly. Okay. We left the bank with that small box of memories. With those undelivered apologies. With that ring that meant everything and nothing. That night, I sat in my living room and went through the photo album again. Really looked at it. At Nathan's face in those pictures. At the boy he'd been before life hardened him. Before fear and selfishness twisted him into someone unrecognizable. And I realized something. I'd spent so long hating the man Nathan became that I'd forgotten the boy he'd been. The boy who'd hugged me tight after his first day of school. Who'd cried when our dog died. Who'd promised to take care of me when he grew up. That boy hadn't been a lie. He'd been real. But somewhere along the way, he'd gotten lost. Buried under pressure and expectations and his own demons. It didn't excuse what he'd done. But it helped me understand that people are complicated. That the same person can be both the boy who promises to protect you and the man who abandons you in a forest. And maybe, just maybe, both versions were true. I called the prison the next day. Asked if I could add my name to Nathan's visitor list. The clerk seemed surprised. Apparently Nathan hadn't had a single visitor in 3 years, but she added me without question. I didn't tell Theo. Didn't tell Victoria. This was something I needed to do alone. The drive to the prison took 2 hours. I had plenty of time to second-guess myself. To turn around. To decide this was a mistake. But I kept driving. The prison was exactly what you'd expect. Grey. Cold. Lifeless. I went through security, got patted down, and was led to a visiting room with plastic chairs and tables bolted to the floor. And then Nathan walked in. He'd aged. His hair was completely grey now. His face lined and tired. He'd lost weight. But his eyes, those were the same. Haunted. Sad. Empty. When he saw me, he stopped walking. Just stood there, staring. Like he couldn't believe I was real. Mom, he whispered. I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit down, Nathan. He sat slowly. Like he was afraid I'd disappear if he moved too fast. We sat in silence for a long moment. I let him look at me. Let him see what the years had done. The grey in my hair. The lines around my eyes. The weight of everything he'd put me through. I got your letters, I said finally. His face crumpled. You did. All of them. Read every single one. I'm sorry, he said. His voice cracked. I'm so sorry, Mom. For everything. Stop, I said. I didn't come here for more apologies. He looked at me, confused. Then why did you come? Good question. Why had I come? To punish him? To forgive him? To get closure? I came because I needed to see you, I said. Needed to look you in the eye and figure out if there's anything left of the boy I raised. Is there? He asked. And he sounded so hopeful. So desperate. I studied him. Really looked at him. At this man who'd been my son. My baby. My whole world for 20 years. I don't know, I said honestly. But I hope so. Nathan's eyes filled with tears. I think about that day all the time. The day I left you in the forest. It's the worst thing I've ever done. Worse than the fraud. Worse than the lawsuits. I left my own child to die. Left you to die. And I have to live with that forever. Yes, I said. You do. I don't expect you to forgive me, he continued. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I loved you. Both of you. I didn't know how to be what you needed. Love isn't enough, Nathan, I said. Love without action is just words. And you gave us plenty of words but nothing else. I know, he whispered. We sat there for a while longer. Not talking. Just existing in the same space for the first time in years. Finally, I stood up. I have to go. Nathan stood too. Will you come back? I looked at him. At this broken man who'd once been my boy. I don't know. Okay, he said. And he seemed to accept that. Can you tell Theo I love him? That I'm proud of him? You can tell him yourself, I said. If he ever wants to hear it. But that's his choice. Not mine. Nathan nodded. Fair enough. I turned to leave, then paused. Nathan. Yeah. I read what you wrote. About being broken. About being scared. And I want you to know something. We were scared too. We were broken too. But we didn't run. We stayed. We fought. We survived. So don't use fear as an excuse. We all have choices. You made yours. His face crumbled again. I know. Good, I said. And I walked away. The drive home felt different. Lighter. Somehow. Like I'd closed a door I didn't even know was still open. When I got home, Theo was waiting on my porch. He looked worried. Where were you? He asked. I've been calling. I sat down beside him. I went to see your father. Theo went very still. You did what? I went to the prison. I needed to see him. To talk to him. Why? Theo's voice was tight. Because I needed to know if I could forgive him, I said. And I needed to do it face to face. And? Theo asked. Can you? I thought about it. About Nathan's letters. About the ring. About the man in that prison who'd once been my son. I'm working on it, I said. Not for him. For me. Because carrying hate is exhausting. And I'm tired, Theo. I'm so tired. Theo was quiet for a long moment. Then, he asked me to visit. Years ago. I said no. Do you regret it? Sometimes, Theo admitted. Not because I miss him. But because. I don't know. Because he's my father. And no matter what he did, that matters. Somehow. It does, I said. Blood doesn't excuse behavior. But it doesn't disappear either. Would you go again? Theo asked. To visit him. Maybe, I said. Would you? Theo stared out at the street. At the life we'd built. The life Nathan had tried to destroy but ultimately couldn't. Maybe, he said finally. Not now. But maybe someday. And that was enough. We didn't need to have all the answers. Didn't need to know exactly how we felt or what we wanted. We just needed to keep moving forward. Keep healing. Keep living. That night, I put Nathan's ring in my jewelry box. Not to wear. Just to have. A reminder of everything that had happened. Everything we'd survived. And in the morning, I woke up and lived my life. Went to the non-profit. Helped the kids. Laughed with Victoria. Had dinner with Theo. Because that's what surviving looks like. Not perfect. Not healed. Just living. Just moving forward. One day at a time. If you're still with me, if this story has meant something to you, then I want you to know you're not alone. Whatever you're going through, whatever pain you're carrying, you can survive it. You can move forward. And you can build something beautiful from the ashes. Check the description box below for more stories like this. Stories of survival. Of hope. Of people who refuse to stay down. Because we all need reminders that we're stronger than we think. There was something Theo hadn't told me. Something he'd been carrying since the day Nathan sued him. I didn't know it then, didn't suspect it. But looking back, I should have seen the signs. The way he'd been so calm during the lawsuit. The way he'd said, just let him do anything. The way he'd smiled when the judge ruled against us. Theo had known something. Had planned something. And I didn't find out what it was until 3 years after Nathan went to prison. It was a Thursday evening. Theo had invited me to dinner at his apartment, the nice one he'd bought after selling his company. We were sitting on his balcony, watching the sunset, when he said, "Grandma, I need to tell you something." The tone of his voice made me nervous. "What is it?" "It's about Dad. About the lawsuit. About everything." I set down my wine glass. "Okay." Theo took a deep breath. "I let him sue me." "What do you mean?" "I mean I knew he was going to sue me before he ever showed up with that lawyer. I knew about the fraud. I knew he was desperate for money. And I knew he'd come after me. So I let him." I stared at my grandson. "You let him?" "I set it up," Theo said. His voice was calm, but I could hear the tension underneath. "I made sure my app looked similar enough to his that he'd have a case. Made sure there was just enough ambiguity that a judge might rule in his favor. I wanted him to sue me." My blood ran cold. "Why?" "Because I needed him to take the bait," Theo said. "I needed him to expose himself. To show the world what kind of person he was. And I needed evidence." "Evidence of what?" "Of the fraud. The embezzlement. All of it." Theo looked at me, and his eyes were hard. When he sued me, he had to open his financial records for discovery. Had to show where his money came from, where it went. And once those records were part of the legal file, they became public. Anyone could access them. Including the SEC. Understanding crashed over me like a wave. "You used the lawsuit to expose him." "Yes." "You let him think he was winning so you could destroy him." "Yes." I stood up, paced to the edge of the balcony. My mind was racing. "So the whole time, the depositions, the trial, the settlement offer, you knew you were going to bury him?" "I knew I had the evidence to bury him," Theo corrected. "I didn't know if it would work. If the SEC would care. If anyone would believe it. But I had to try." "And the $200,000 he won?" Theo smiled grimly. "Insurance money. I'd taken out a policy against legal judgments. The insurance company paid him, not me. And I made sure every penny of that payment was documented. Because that money, that was the last piece of evidence the SEC needed. Nathan taking money from me, money he claimed was rightfully his, while he was already under investigation for fraud. That sealed his fate." I stared at my grandson. This boy I'd raised. This man I thought I knew. "You played him." "I did." "You let him think he'd won. Let him take money from you. All so you could watch him fall." "Yes," Theo said simply. I didn't know how to feel. Proud? Horrified? Impressed? That's cold, Theo." "I know," he said. "And I'm not proud of it. But it was necessary." "Was it?" I asked. "Or did you just want revenge?" Theo looked at me for a long moment. "Both," he said finally. "I wanted him to pay for what he did. But I also wanted to make sure he could never hurt anyone else. He was stealing from his investors. From his employees. From people who trusted him. Someone had to stop him." "So you became the one to stop him?" "Yes." I sat back down. Tried to process this. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to be complicit," Theo said. If things went wrong, if Nathan figured it out, I didn't want you caught in the crossfire. And I didn't want you to try to stop me. I would have, I said immediately. I know, Theo said. That's why I didn't tell you. We sat in silence for a long time. The sun had set. The city lights were coming on. And I was trying to figure out how I felt about what my grandson had done. Do you regret it? I asked finally. Theo thought about it. No. I don't regret stopping him. But I regret what it did to me. The person I had to become to pull it off. The coldness. The calculation. That's not who I want to be. But it's who you were, I said. For a while, Theo agreed. But not anymore. That's why I started the non-profit. Why I'm trying to help kids instead of hurt people. I needed to balance it out. To prove to myself that I'm not him. You're not, I said firmly. You're nothing like him. I was, though, Theo said. For those 2 years while I was planning everything, I was exactly like him. Cold. Calculating. Willing to use people to get what I wanted. But you were doing it to stop him, I protested. That's different. Is it? Theo asked. Because it didn't feel different. It felt empty. Like I'd sold a piece of myself to get revenge. And I'm still trying to get that piece back. I reached over and took his hand. You'll find it. You're already finding it. Theo squeezed my hand. I hope so. I know so, I said. Because you're here. You're doing good work. You're helping people. That's not something Nathan would ever do. Maybe, Theo said. But I want to be better than not Nathan. I want to be good on my own terms. You are, I said. You're one of the best people I know. Theo smiled at that. A real smile. Thanks, Grandma. We finished our wine and went inside. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, the non-profit, his new relationship, my garden. But I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd told me. About how he'd manipulated the entire situation. How he'd been 10 steps ahead of everyone. How he'd systematically destroyed his father while appearing to be the victim. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. And it made me realize something. Theo had inherited Nathan's intelligence, his strategic mind, his ability to play the long game. But unlike Nathan, Theo had also inherited something else. A conscience. That's what had saved him. Not the therapy or the non-profit or the healing. The conscience. The part of him that knew what he'd done was dark, even if it was justified. The part that refused to let revenge define him. Nathan didn't have that. He'd done terrible things and felt entitled to them. Victimized by them, even. He'd never looked in the mirror and been horrified by what he saw. But Theo had. And that made all the difference. Later that night, after I'd gone home, I got a text from Theo. Asterisk, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was afraid you'd think less of me. Asterisk. I texted back. Asterisk, I could never think less of you. You did what you had to do. And you're working to be better. That's all anyone can ask. Asterisk. His response came quickly. Asterisk, I love you, Grandma. Asterisk. Asterisk, I love you too. Asterisk, I wrote back. Asterisk, more than you'll ever know. Asterisk. The next day, Victoria called me. She'd been acting strange lately, nervous, secretive. I'd assumed it was about work or her relationship with Theo. But when I answered the phone, her first words were, Did Theo tell you? Tell me what? About Nathan. About what he did. So she knew too. When did he tell you? Last week, Victoria said. I didn't know what to think. I still don't. Neither do I admitted. Is it wrong that I'm proud of him? Victoria asked. For stopping Nathan, I mean. Even if the methods were dark. I supplied. Yeah. I thought about it. No. I don't think it's wrong. Theo did what the system couldn't. He protected people. That matters. But at what cost? Victoria asked. He said it changed him. Made him into someone he didn't want to be. It did, I said. But he's fighting his way back. And we're going to help him. How? By reminding him who he is, I said. By showing him that one dark chapter doesn't define the whole book. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then, he's lucky to have you. We're lucky to have each other, I said. And it was true. We were lucky. Despite everything, despite Nathan, despite the abandonment, despite the lawsuits and the revenge and the pain, we'd found each other. We'd built something real. And that was worth more than any amount of money or justice or closure. Over the next few months, Theo continued to open up about what he'd done. About the planning. The manipulation. The cold calculation that had gone into destroying Nathan. He talked about it in therapy. Talked about it with me and Victoria. Talked about it with himself, late at night when the guilt got too heavy. And slowly, he started to forgive himself. Not for what he'd done to Nathan, that, he said, he didn't regret. But for what he'd done to himself. For the peace of his soul he'd sacrificed in pursuit of revenge. I thought revenge would fix me, he told me one afternoon. We were at the non-profit, watching the kids work on their projects. I thought if I made him pay, I'd feel whole again. But it didn't work like that. Revenge never does, I said. No, Theo agreed. It just leaves you emptier than before. And then you have to figure out how to fill that emptiness with something real. And have you? I asked. Figured it out. Theo looked at the kids. At their smiling faces. At the future he was helping them build. I'm trying, he said. Every day, I'm trying. And that was enough. Because trying is all any of us can do. We try to be better. To do better. To heal and move forward and build something meaningful from the wreckage of our past. Theo was doing that. We all were. And maybe, just maybe, we were going to be okay. If you're watching this and you've ever made choices you regret, if you've ever done something dark in pursuit of justice, know this, you're not defined by your worst moment. You're defined by what you do next. By how you pick yourself up. By how you try to be better. Check the description box below for more stories of redemption and second chances. Because we all deserve the opportunity to grow. 4 years after Nathan went to prison, I received a letter. Not from Nathan's lawyer this time. From Nathan himself. It arrived on a Tuesday morning. Standard prison envelope. His name and inmate number printed in the corner. I held it for a long time, debating whether to open it or throw it away. I opened it. Dear Mom I'm dying. That's how it started. 3 words that stopped my heart. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months. Cancer. It's aggressive, and by the time they caught it, it had already spread. They're doing what they can, but we both know how this ends. I'm not writing to ask for sympathy. I don't deserve it. I'm writing because I have things I need to say, and I'm running out of time to say them. I know what Theo did. I figured it out about a year ago. A lawyer friend of mine, one of the few who still talks to me, explained how the evidence got to the SEC. How the timing lined up with the lawsuit. How perfectly it all fell into place. At first, I was angry. Felt betrayed. But then I realized something. He learned it from me. The manipulation. The long game. The willingness to sacrifice pieces on the board to win the match. He's my son. Of course he's like me. But he's also better than me. Because he knows when to stop. He knows there's more to life than winning. I never learned that. And that's why I'm here, dying in a prison cell, while he's out there changing the world. I'm proud of him. I know I don't have the right to be, but I am. He took the worst parts of me, the calculation, the intelligence, the ruthlessness, and he used them for something good. He stopped me from hurting more people. And then he went out and helped people instead. That takes strength I never had. I want you to tell him something for me. Tell him I understand why he did it. Tell him I would have done the same thing in his position. And tell him I'm sorry. Not just for what I did to him, but for making him become someone he didn't want to be. For forcing him to go dark to stop me. That's on me too. And Mom. I'm sorry to you too. For everything. For being a coward. For running when I should have stayed. For choosing comfort over responsibility. For wasting the love you gave me. You were a good mother. The best. And I was a terrible son. I know that now. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even want it. I just wanted you to know that I see it all clearly now. And I wish, God, I wish, I could go back and do it differently. But I can't. So all I can do is say I'm sorry and hope that someday, maybe, you'll think of me and not feel only hate. I love you, Mom. I always have. I just didn't know how to show it until it was too late. Nathan. I read the letter 3 times. And then I cried. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere I didn't know still existed. Because despite everything, despite the abandonment and the lawsuits and the years of pain, he was still my son. And he was dying. I called Theo. Told him about the letter. Read it to him over the phone. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then, he figured it out. He did. How do you feel about that? I don't know, I said honestly. How do you feel? Another long pause. Relieved, I think. That I don't have to pretend anymore. That he knows the truth. He's dying, Theo. I know. Do you want to see him? Silence. Then, I don't know. Do you? And that was the question, wasn't it? Did I want to see my son one last time before he died? Did I want to sit across from him in that sterile visiting room and say, "What? Goodbye? I forgive you. I still love you. I think I do," I said finally. "I think I need to." "Then I'll go with you," Theo said. "If you want me to." "You will." "Yeah," Theo said. "He's my father. And he's dying. I should be there." So we went. Together. Victoria came too, said she needed closure, needed to see him one last time. We drove to the prison on a Saturday morning, all 3 of us quiet, lost in our own thoughts. The prison had moved Nathan to a medical facility within the complex. When we walked into the visiting room, I almost didn't recognize him. He'd lost at least 50 pounds. His skin was grey, stretched tight over bones. His eyes were sunken, but they lit up when he saw us. "You came," he whispered. His voice was rough, damaged. "We came," I said. Nathan looked at Theo. At Victoria. Back to me. "All of you." We sat down. None of us quite knew what to say. Finally, Nathan broke the silence. "Thank you. For coming. I know I don't deserve it." "You don't," Theo said. His voice wasn't cruel. Just factual. "But we're here anyway." Nathan smiled slightly. "You were always smarter than me. All of you." "Not smarter," I said. "Just better at being human." Nathan laughed, a harsh, painful sound. "Yeah. That." We sat there for a while. Not talking. Just being together for the first time in years. And it was strange how normal it felt. Like we were a family again. Broken and damaged and barely held together, but a family. "I read your letter," I said finally. Nathan nodded. "What did you think?" "I think you're right. About all of it. About Theo. About yourself. About what you did." "And?" Nathan asked. "Can you forgive me?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. I'm trying to. I've been trying for years. And I think I'm getting there. Not because you deserve it, but because I need to let go. "That's fair," Nathan said. Theo spoke up. "I figured you'd realize what I did. You're too smart not to." "Took me longer than it should have," Nathan admitted. "But yeah, I figured it out. And I want you to know, I'm not angry about it. You did what you had to do. What I would have done." "I'm not like you," Theo said sharply. "No," Nathan agreed. "You're better. But you're still my son. And I see myself in you. The good parts and the bad." "I don't want to be like you," Theo said. His voice cracked. "Then don't be," Nathan said simply. "Learn from my mistakes. Be the man I couldn't be. You're already doing it. Keep doing it." Theo looked away, jaw clenched. Victoria finally spoke. "Why did you do it, Nathan? Why did you leave us?" Nathan looked at his ex-wife. "Because I was a coward. Because I looked at my life, at the responsibility, the weight of it all, and I ran. I told myself it was for the best. That you'd figure it out without me. But the truth is, I was just scared. Scared of failing. Scared of not being enough." "So you became nothing instead," Victoria said. "Yeah," Nathan said. "I did." We talked for another hour. About the past. About regrets. About the people we'd become and the lives we'd built without him. Nathan listened more than he spoke. And I could see it in his face, the understanding of everything he'd lost. Everything he'd thrown away. When it was time to leave, Nathan asked one more thing. Will you come back? Before the end. I looked at Theo. At Victoria. They both nodded. We'll come back, I said. Thank you, Nathan whispered. For everything. For raising him. For being there when I wasn't. For not letting him turn into me. He never could have been you, I said. He has too much heart. Nathan smiled sadly. He got that from you. We left. Drove home in silence. And that night, I sat in my living room and thought about forgiveness. About death. About the strange, complicated tangle of love and hate and everything in between. Nathan was dying. And despite everything, I was sad. Not for the man he'd become, but for the boy he'd been. For the potential he'd wasted. For the family he'd destroyed. But I was also grateful. Grateful that Theo hadn't become him. Grateful that we'd survived. Grateful that we'd built something beautiful from the ruins. And maybe that was enough. If you're still here, still listening, then you understand something important. Life is complicated. People are complicated. And sometimes the people who hurt us most are also the people we love. That's not weakness. That's being human. And if you need more reminders that it's okay to have complicated feelings, that it's okay to struggle with forgiveness, check the description box below. Because you're not alone in this. Nathan died 6 weeks later. It was a Friday morning. The prison called to tell us he'd passed peacefully in his sleep. They asked if we wanted to claim the body. We said yes. The funeral was small. Just me, Theo, Victoria, and a handful of people from Nathan's past, old co-workers, former friends who remembered the boy he'd been before everything fell apart. We held it at a small chapel outside the city. Nothing fancy. Nothing elaborate. Just a simple service for a complicated man. I didn't cry. I'd done all my crying already. I just sat there, numb, listening to the pastor talk about redemption and forgiveness and peace. Words that sounded hollow but also necessary. Theo gave the eulogy. I hadn't asked him to. He'd volunteered. Said he needed to say something. He stood at the podium, looking out at the handful of people gathered, and spoke. My father was not a good man, Theo said. His voice was steady, clear. He abandoned me when I was 10. He abandoned my grandmother. He stole from people who trusted him. He spent years running from his responsibilities and his mistakes. And he died in prison because of it. There was an uncomfortable shifting in the audience. This wasn't the typical eulogy. But, Theo continued, he was also my father. And despite everything, I loved him. Not because he earned it. But because that's what children do. We love our parents even when they don't deserve it. Even when it hurts. His voice wavered slightly. The last time I saw him, he told me not to become him. To learn from his mistakes. To be better. And I'm going to honor that. Not by pretending he was someone he wasn't. Not by forgiving things that shouldn't be forgiven. But by taking the lessons he taught me, both the good ones and the painful ones, and using them to build something meaningful. Theo looked at me. My grandmother taught me what real love looks like. What sacrifice and strength and resilience mean. My father taught me what happens when you run from responsibility. When you choose fear over courage. Both lessons matter. Both shaped who I am. He turned back to the room. So I'm not here to celebrate my father's life. I'm here to acknowledge it. To say that he existed. That he mattered, even in his failure. And to promise that I will spend the rest of my life being the man he couldn't be. Theo sat down. The chapel was silent. And I felt something shift inside me. A final release. A letting go. After the service, we buried Nathan in a simple plot with a simple headstone. No flowery words. Just his name and dates. That felt right somehow. Honest. As we walked away from the grave, Victoria put her arm around me. How are you holding up? I'm okay, I said. And I meant it. It's strange. I thought I'd feel more. But mostly I just feel, done. Done is good, Victoria said. Done means you can move forward. Theo walked ahead of us, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched. I caught up to him and linked my arm through his. That was a good eulogy, I said. It was honest, Theo replied. That's all I could give him. It was enough. We drove home together, the three of us. This strange little family built from wreckage and pain and stubborn refusal to give up. We ordered pizza, watched a movie, talked about normal things, work, weather, plans for the weekend. And it felt right. Like we'd finally closed a chapter and could start a new one. Over the next few months, life settled into a new rhythm. Theo's non-profit continued to grow. He hired more staff, expanded to 3 new cities, helped hundreds of kids get access to education and opportunity. He was making a real difference. The kind Nathan had always talked about but never actually pursued. Victoria opened her own business, a small consulting firm helping women re-enter the workforce after major life disruptions. She said it was her way of paying forward the second chance she'd been given. Her way of turning her mistakes into something useful. And me? I finally wrote a book. I'd been thinking about it for years. About telling our story. Not for fame or money, but because I thought it might help someone else. Someone struggling with abandonment or betrayal or the complicated grief of loving someone who hurt you. I wrote it all down. The forest. The lawsuit. The revenge. The forgiveness. The messy, painful, beautiful journey of surviving the worst thing that ever happened to us. Theo helped me edit it. Victoria designed the cover. We self-published it on a rainy Tuesday in March, not expecting much. Within a month, it had sold 10,000 copies. Within 6 months, 50,000. People wrote to me, told me their stories, told me how they'd been abandoned by parents, by children, by people they loved. Told me how they'd found our story and felt less alone. And I realized something. Nathan's greatest legacy wasn't his app or his money or anything he'd built for himself. It was the story of what happened when he destroyed his family. Because that story, our story, was helping people heal. There's a poetry to that. A justice that the courts could never provide. 1 year after Nathan died, we held a memorial event at the nonprofit. Not for Nathan, we'd said our goodbyes. But for all the kids who'd lost parents. Who'd been abandoned or orphaned or left behind. We called it the Phoenix Project, a celebration of rising from ashes, of becoming something beautiful despite the fire. Over 200 kids showed up. They shared their stories, their pain, their victories. And I watched Theo stand at the front of the room, listening to each one with the same quiet intensity he'd always had. The same fierce determination to help. This, I thought, is what redemption looks like. Not the abuser finding peace, but the abused building something so powerful, so meaningful, that it transforms their pain into purpose. After the event, a girl came up to me. She couldn't have been more than 13. Small, with dark eyes and a nervous smile. "Are you Eleanor?" she asked. "I am." "I read your book," she said. "My mom left us 2 years ago. Just walked out. And I thought it meant something was wrong with me. Like I wasn't worth staying for. My heart broke." "Oh, sweetheart. But your book helped me understand," she continued. "It wasn't about me. It was about her. About her being broken. And I can't fix her. But I can fix myself. I can choose to be different." I pulled her into a hug. Felt her small body shake with quiet tears. "You're already different. You're here. You're fighting. That takes so much courage." "Theo says the same thing," she said. "He says surviving is an act of rebellion." I smiled. "He's right." The girl pulled back, wiped her eyes. "Thank you. For writing it. For being honest about how hard it is. Everyone always wants stories with happy endings. But yours is real." "Does it help?" I asked. "Even without the happy ending?" She thought about it. "Yeah. Because it shows that you can survive without one. That you can be okay even when things don't work out perfectly. That's more helpful than pretending everything's fine." She walked away, back to her friends. And I stood there thinking about happy endings. About what they mean. About whether we'd gotten one. Nathan was dead. That wasn't happy. We'd been abandoned, betrayed, traumatized. That wasn't happy. We'd spent years fighting, hurting, struggling to survive. That wasn't happy either. But we were here. We were together. We'd built something meaningful from the wreckage. We were helping people. We were loved and we were whole, even with our scars. Maybe that was happy. Not the fairy tale version, but the real one. The messy, complicated, hard-won version that actually means something. That night, Theo, Victoria, and I had dinner at my house. We'd made it a tradition, Friday night dinners, no phones, just us. We cooked together, ate together, talked about our weeks. I got a letter today, Theo said, passing the salad. From one of the kids at the non-profit. He got accepted to MIT. Full scholarship. That's wonderful. Victoria said. It is, Theo agreed. He wrote that if it wasn't for the program, he'd probably be dead or in jail. Said we saved his life. You saved his life, I corrected. You built that program. We built it, Theo said, looking at both of us. All of us. It takes a village, right? It does, I said. And we're a pretty good village. Victoria raised her glass. To our village. Weird and broken and perfect. We clinked glasses. Drank. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was enough. Later, after Victoria had gone home and Theo was getting ready to leave, he paused at the door. Grandma. Yeah. Do you think he's at peace? Theo asked. Dad, I mean, wherever he is. I thought about Nathan. About the boy he'd been and the man he'd become. About his last letter and his final apology. About the waste of it all. I don't know, I said honestly. But I hope so. I hope he found whatever he was looking for. Me too, Theo said quietly. Because I'm tired of being angry at him. Then stop, I said. You don't have to forgive him. But you can let go of the anger. You've earned that. Theo nodded. Hugged me tight. I love you, Grandma. I love you too, sweetheart. So much. He left. And I stood on my porch watching his car disappear down the street. Watching the taillights fade into the darkness. And I thought about the forest. About that day 10 years ago when Nathan had driven away and left us there. How terrified I'd been. How certain I was that we wouldn't survive. But we had. We'd walked out of those woods. We'd built new lives. We'd fought battles and won wars and come out stronger on the other side. Nathan had tried to destroy us. And in some ways, he had. He'd broken things that would never fully heal. Left scars that would never fade. But he'd also failed. Because we were still here. Still standing. Still loving each other. Still building something beautiful. And that survival, that resilience, that stubborn refusal to stay down, was the greatest revenge of all. Not revenge against Nathan. Revenge against the idea that abandonment wins. That betrayal destroys. That broken people stay broken. We'd proven that wrong. Every single day, we proved it wrong. I went inside. Made myself a cup of tea. Sat in my favorite chair with a book, not mine, someone else's. And I smiled. Because we'd made it. Against all odds, through all the pain, past all the obstacles. We'd made it. And that was everything. Epilogue. 5 years later Theo got married. To a wonderful person named Adrian who worked as a teacher and loved him fiercely. The wedding was beautiful, small and intimate, held in a garden with fairy lights and flowers everywhere. I walked Theo down the aisle. Victoria sat in the front row crying happy tears. And as I watched my grandson promise to love and cherish someone, to be there through thick and thin, I thought about Nathan. About how he'd missed this. How he'd missed everything because he'd been too afraid to stay. His loss. Our gain. The non-profit expanded to 12 cities. They'd helped over 5,000 kids. Changed lives. Saved lives. Built futures. Victoria's business was thriving. She'd become a sought-after speaker on second chances and resilience. She'd found her purpose. Her peace. And me? I wrote 2 more books. Started a podcast. Traveled a little. Spent time with my grandson and his spouse. Watched them build a life together. A family. I thought about Nathan sometimes. Wondered what he'd think of all this. If he'd be proud. If he'd regret. If he'd finally understand what he'd thrown away. But mostly, I didn't think about him at all. Because this story, our story, wasn't about him anymore. It was about us. About survival. About choosing to be better. About building something meaningful from nothing. Nathan was a chapter in our book. An important one. A painful one. But just one chapter. The rest of the book. That was ours to write. And we were writing something beautiful. If you've made it all the way to the end of this story, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for bearing witness to our pain and our healing. Thank you for understanding that some stories don't have neat endings. They just have continuings. If this story touched you, if it helped you in some way, leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your story. Because we're all in this together. All of us trying to survive, trying to heal, trying to build something meaningful from our pain. And check the description box below for more stories like this. Stories of people who refused to give up. Who turned their trauma into triumph. Who proved that broken doesn't mean defeated. Because you are not alone. You are not broken beyond repair. You are surviving. You are fighting. You are enough. And if an old woman and her grandson can walk out of a forest and build a life worth living, so can you. Keep going. Keep fighting. Keep believing that tomorrow can be better than today. Because it can be. I promise you, it can be.